All right, welcome back. Today we are doing UCX Collision, which is how to create FBX Pipeline Collision in Unreal Engine 4 using 3D Studio Max 2014. This is part of Donnan's tips and tricks, so you may just come here looking for collision and not part of the regular class, and that's fine. That's absolutely fine. So go ahead and let's crack on. Today we are going to be using a model from Heroes of the Storm. Now, the reason I use this is because I was working on it anyway, just sort of checking it out. It's really amazing. It's fantastic work. Those Blizzard guys, they have a good idea what they're doing. Anyway, so this is Stitches, and we're going to use Stitches today as our example. So, today we're going to talk about collision, and collision is how game engines, especially Unreal 4, calculates where the model is going to move from. So we're going to add collision to Stitches. So I've got 3ds Max 2014. I've got Unreal 4. I'm actually using 4.8. Although it probably will stay basically the same all the way through. And I've also got my static mesh pipeline on the website for Unreal. So this FBX static mesh pipeline has everything you need to know about how to set up your model for collision. A couple things. They always, when you import from 3D Studio into Unreal 4, the collision or the pivot point is always set to 0, 0, 0. So make sure that wherever your model is, wherever 0, 0, 0 is on the grid, that's where collision or your pivot point will be. Okay, so let's go ahead and pull that up. So we have Stitches right here. Now to export any object as an FBX, it's really pretty simple. You just select the object, go to up here to export, and we can click the little caret, export selected. Now you'll see I've got a whole bunch of stitches already. This is going to be stitches with no collision. We're just going to select no collision stitches and then save it. And I'm overwriting something, so that's fine. Now it's going to bring up these options. Now the options you want set for Unreal 4 are as follows. Now I already have a preset, and you can actually edit your own preset and save a preset once you have it saved. For now, Unreal 4 on their website, you can actually find out what they encourage you to set right here. So they encourage smoothing groups, tangents and binormals, and triangulation. Now, they also, because they encourage the smoothing groups, preserving edge orientation also helps with that, because sometimes I would get small errors. So once I set on preserve edge orientation, that cleared up those errors. I'm also including animation, but this Stitches doesn't have any, so there's none of that. Baking the animation is important, we'll get to that later, for a skeletal mesh. And then embedding media, that will embed the material. So if I have a material that I'm attaching to him, it will go with him, as long as it's an actual material. Otherwise it won't necessarily go. Units, Unreal works in centimeters and meters, so you want to make sure that you are already set up for centimeters. If you've been following along with my classes, then you already are set up in centimeters. If not, you can set that up in customized preferences, unit setup. And then the FBX file format's very important. Has to be binary. It has to be FBX 2014. Now, even if you've got a later version, they want FBX 2014. It's very critical. They go through that on the website. They're very clear about how, at the moment, FBX 14 using a different version during export may result in incompatibilities. All right, cool. Whoops. Let's minimize that. Okay, great. So I'm going to click OK. So now this Stitches has been exported, so we can actually open up Unreal. Now this is just a generic first-person shooter document, like a starting file. I'm going to go to my collision. I'm just going to take Stitches, no collision, and drag him in here. I may have to move that over. Stitches, no collision. There we go. I had to click on it. Now, it notices that there's no skeleton attached to the stitches, so I'm not going to import a skeletal, and it should not be selected when you're importing something. Now, the difference between a skeletal and a static mesh is static meshes always look the same. Okay, this stitches that I just exported, you're never going to be able to move his arms. You're never going to be able to adjust him. He is like a little plastic figurine. In this case, I was preparing him to be printed, so he is going to be a little plastic figurine, but you get the idea. So we're going to click import. The uniform scale, we could increase, we can import the materials and the textures if you want, since I've included them. I'm not going to because I did not intend to include them. So import. All right, there we go. Now it's saying the imported mesh is very small, which means it could be a problem. That's very nice of them to tell us that, but actually I was printing this out so that it was going to be small. So I actually knew it was going to be small. So I can take this, I can actually double click down here, and it pulls up a separate window. And it's very, very, very small. All right, we're going to zoom in a little bit. Now, because it had no collision, Unreal will automatically generate collision when you bring it in. Okay? If I delete, let's delete this. And yes, I want to delete that asset. I'm going to bring it in. No collision again. I'm pretty sure down here, miscellaneous. Oh, auto-generate collision is on. So let's turn that off and then import it again. Okay, clear that, close it, drag it in there. And I'm going to hit space twice to get this to a larger scale. I want to scale him up. All right, so he's more like the stitches we know and love, which means he's huge. Notice his pivot point is all wacky because he is actually not on center. So if I play from here, all right, you can see stitches are right here, and you can see I can walk right through him. I can shoot right through him as well. Man, that was loud. So you get the idea. Like, so this stitches has no collision at all. Boop. Okay, so no collision, and that's fine. Now we could have added collision when we brought him in, and that would be fine too. And you saw how to do that. Just drag it in, like we did before. No collision. Yes to all, and auto-generate collision, and then import. Clear. Close. Drag him in. It may automatically rebuild him. I'm not sure. Grab him there, increase his size, and hit space again to move him over, and then play. Alright, let's see. So this stitches now has collision. They both have collision. So if I shoot him, the ball bounces off. Now, you'll notice I can go in here. I'm going to delete one of these since this one now has collision because we re-imported the file. Okay, I'm going to make him really big so we can see one of the problems we have with him. Oops, did not mean to grab that. I wondered why that was low. Okay, so let's go ahead and rotate him 90 degrees, and then I'm going to move him over. Good enough. I'm going to play from here. Alright, cool. So you'll notice if I try and shoot under his axe there, it doesn't always go. Right? If I shoot above his axe, it still bounces off. Okay? So that means his collision is not as accurate as we want it to be. If you actually click on him, you can see his collision box. Alright? Where'd he go? He's really small, so he's kind of hard to get a hold of. Alright. So that's the collision that it created. Now, is it great? It's not terrible. It's very much around roughly the right size. But what we can do is instead of letting Unreal do the collision for us, we can make sure the collision is accurate, which is really important when you're creating things like a pipe that you want the player to run through. That sort of stuff has to have its own built-in collision. So what we're going to do is we're going to go back to 3D Studio, and we're going to go ahead and zoom out a little bit. Now this is collision for a box. Like this is the generic box-based collision. Okay, if you create collision, you can actually create it so it has 6 degrees of 6 planes, 6 degrees of precision. I think DOP is what it stands for. So you can see Stitches now has basically a box around him. That means anytime you try and shoot, it will bounce off of this box. This is the collision that we created for him. All right, now I created this separately. This was just a regular box that I then divided and then built it so it would frame around him a little better. Okay, you'll notice that it kind of looks like a trash bag wrapped around him, and that's what you want. You'll also notice that some sections, like this little handle part of his back handle, sticks out of the bag, and that's okay. We want it to be close, but if it's not 100% accurate, that's fine. Now when we do that, we actually need to create something called a UCX. So we create a whole new box. Okay, so I'm going to grab actually both of these objects, both of them. Now this outside is called UCX stitches underscore convex underscore 00. So anytime you create this trash bag system, you have to have I start with a box, and that's fine. But you have to name it exactly the same name. So this is called stitches underscore convex. That's because UCX, if you go to their website, UCX actually stands for Unreal Convex. Right? Now there's multiple types of collision that they have in Unreal 4. However, we basically only use one version. The UBX is a box. So just like we had before, if I wanted to use this and call it UBX, I could. UBX stands for Unreal Box Collision. Next, we have USP. That's spheres. Now notice it says render mesh name. That means the render mesh has to be the exact same name. And then if there's multiple objects, you put an underscore and then how many objects there are. So number. Spheres are created with a sphere object type. Now notice the sphere does not need to have many segments. 8 is a good number, they say, because the sphere is actually converted into a true sphere for collision. Okay, so you shouldn't move the vertices around when you actually create the box. Also with this box, it has to be a cube. All right, so you can't adjust those either. They are more efficient than convex, but they're so restrictive. They're really only used for things like dice in the box case or balls, planets, anything that's absolutely spherical. Otherwise, it's just not valuable. UCX, however, is the completely closed convex 3D shape. So this is completely closed and it's convex. There's no way you can break one of these planes. Think about connecting the dots. Can you put put something near it and not and interfere with the dot? No. Whereas these two dots, if you were to wrap a rope around this shape, there would be edges that you cannot touch with the rope. That is a problem. All right, if I wrapped a rope around this shape, it would equally cover every single edge. Same here. It would go right along that edge, that edge, that edge, and that edge. Whereas here, it would come through here, down there, and then across, and then over. So that's bad. Okay, so that means it has to be completely closed. All right. If you have multiple objects, you have to create multiple pieces of collision. So if I've got a candy, and I've got a lollipop, I've got one box up here, which would be lollipop or UCX candy, right? And then if this was a different object, you call this UCX stick. Notice there's no, you cannot have the two pieces connect. Apparently that causes issues. So let's close this and go back to 3D modeling or 3ds. You'll notice I did that with this one. Now each one of these pieces, like this object here, is called stitches multi-convex. You'll notice every single box is called UCX underscore stitches multi-convex underscore 04, because that's the fourth box. Each one of these, and you can see over here, each one of these shapes is part of the convex thing. Now it doesn't matter what color they are or stuff like that because they're invisible in the engine. Also you'll notice I didn't put an extra piece here for the arm. So this arm will have 0 collision. Okay? So this is the most complex version of stitches. Now let's go ahead and grab all of that. I'm going to go to File, Export. I called him multi, so I'm going to save that. Yes, replace. All of the settings are the same as I mentioned before. Click OK. Go into Unreal, or Stitches Multi. Oh, so that's the file. I'm going to go Stitches Multi and drag it in from the other screen. Okay, now, that's confusing. Okay, it seems to think it was skeletal. Let's make sure I didn't get something that I did not intend. I think I may have got other pieces I did not intend to get. Okay, so I have all of these pieces. Actually, I'm going to hit H and make sure I just have what I want. Notice they're all numbered slightly different, but the name is identical. So click OK, and then try it again. File, Export, selected. Now there's no bones in here, so I could turn that off. I could turn off animation. I could turn off, basically that's it. I could turn off embed media if I don't want the other stuff to come in. Now, cameras, don't need them. Lights, don't need them. Everything else is good. Click OK. All right, let's try it again. Go back into, Unreal. All right, grab my Stitches Multi. Try it again. That's better. Notice it realizes there's no skeleton there. Let's go ahead and now we don't need to auto-generate collision because it will do it with the pieces. So import, and once again it says it's small. Clear that, close it. So if I double-click Stitches Multi, I look closely, you'll see that all of those boxes that I created are there. All right, this is good. That means I should be able to pull him into the engine. Stitches Multi, drag him out. He needs to be increased in size too. Alright, I will play from here. Stitches Multi is over here. Now, we said his arm didn't have collision, right? So I can shoot right through his arm. However, I can shoot underneath his axe now. And it only bounces off the parts that actually would bounce off of. Notice I also did not have collision on his chain. So once again, it only goes through those pieces. Alright, cool. So that's the two main types of collision, especially for static mesh. Now just for bonus, if you're looking for skeletal mesh, I went ahead and added that as well. So for a skeletal mesh, I'll grab this object, and this is our skeleton, and he has just a little bit of animation, just like I took a few minutes to get some animation so that we could see it. Not really so that it's important, but just so we can see it. Alright, so I'm going to select that, File, Export, and this is Skelly. Actually, I think I'm going to call this SK. SK is the default static mesh stands for SM for static mesh. Unreal has been using that since 03, or since Unreal 3. SM is for static mesh. SK is for skeletal mesh. I'm going to include the animation, and I'm going to bake it. And that should be it. Yep, click OK. And it should export out. And now I'm going to go in Unreal again, grab Stitches SK, drag them in. Now it recognizes it's an imported skeletal. The skeleton, don't worry about that because it's the imported asset itself. And then we'll do import materials and textures just so you see what that looks like. So now this time we actually have materials and textures. So it creates the material, and it was green, so he's green now. This way we can keep them separate. We'll drag him in, maximize him, make him bigger. Now his collision is based on his skeleton. So if I hit play, actually I'm going to move him around like this and then hit play. Right, so he's over here. Now his collision is based on his skeleton. So wherever his skeleton is, you'll be able to hit him. Now I did not put a bone in his axe, but it's still registering some collision there. Right, I can't walk through him. Sort of around. So it pushes me out, and it has some collision. Now, because he's a skeletal mesh, we can actually simulate physics on him, which is fun because then he'll just flop around. Because we haven't put any sort of animation on him. But he does just sort of like flail about. You can see like the chain, all that's connected to one bone, so it doesn't deform. That's all just one wrist bone. But you can see how that sort of lays out, and it's pretty funny actually. I think it's pretty funny, especially his face. It was kind of like Slimer. Anyway, so that's it. That's collision. So for simple things like boxes and stuff like that, you just you don't even really need to create collision. However, if you have anything that's moderately complex, you want to use UCX. And let's go back into 3D Studio real quick and just sort of look at it. You'll notice that my collision files here, every single one, I'll hit F3 so you can see through them. They do not connect with one another. It's absolutely critical. There's always just a little bit of space there. That way they are not going to intersect. Intersecting is very bad, I'm told. That's what the website says, so that's what I did. I stayed away from intersections. If you want to do collision like this, the engine will basically do it, so you don't need to worry about that. So if your object is simple and it doesn't have any holes, you can basically just do that and export it as a static object, and the collision will go with it, or the collision will be automatically generated upon import. However, if you want something more complicated, you want to make sure you can run under his legs or something, then you need to make sure that you have collision built in. All right. I hope that helps. If you have any questions, leave questions in the comments area. They ring through on my phone, so I usually get back to them pretty quickly. Check out the rest of the YouTube page for more interesting stuff. If you're interested in learning a little 3ds Max from scratch, I've got a whole bunch of other videos for you. And that's basically it. I hope you learned something, and have a good time. See you next time.